Chris says, can we get us to mute our mics? Mine's not on.
I don't know what that is. This one is. How do we can?
That one we can't mute, okay.
Okay.
It's gonna be close to 45 seconds. We accomplished the same thing, right? 4440. Never heard of that. You can hear everyone. Okay. I'm showing for it. It's almost 7 o'clock. What time? 6:58. So Joanna, we didn't get a mic over there. Okay. Okay, we got 2 minutes here to 7. We'll get started here in half a second. I just have to send an email to Gary. I don't want him to know what it is, so just give me a second. I never saw blue sky golf course. Sitting around the evening yourself for lunch.
What time do you start? No,
Just in the morning got weird. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we got the agenda in front of us. I need to add an in-camera on number 9 and move adjournment to 10 for legal. Is there any other additions to the agenda? As I see none. Councillor Brownell,
I move that we accept the agenda as presented,
amended.
amended, yes.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we will jump in. Our first issue on the agenda tonight is a delegation of community futures. And so Robin Lee and Josh are here, but it looks like Robin Lee is going solo there. Okay.
The first part I will do.
Okay.
So first part, we have a PowerPoint presentation. Of course, it's glitching. So we have the presenter view up, not.
That's fine.
Okay. So yeah, for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Robin Lee Vance, business analyst at Community Futures. Josh is our general manager. In March, we presented the business visitation survey that was done in fall of 2019. We were supposed to present something about the comments, the qualitative data, but that got put off because of the pandemic. So we'll talk about that tonight. A question you might have is the information from the survey still valid? Because we started doing the survey basically the very last week of August 2019, and we collected data into November. The answer is probably that it was good information in March. I think it gives us a really good baseline. There might be a few adjustments as a result of the pandemic, but yeah, it's still useful. So, and this is the agenda, and just a picture, which was also on the business report, was, one of our busiest days, downtown Slave Lake, so the block party. So, okay, the survey. So 4 parties were involved: Town of Slave Lake Chamber of Commerce, Alberta Labor and Immigration, and Community Futures conducted this survey. And we went in person to a whole bunch of either managers or owners. Almost every business on that survey was within the Town of Slave Lake boundaries. Yeah, and we got a pretty good buy-in. 18% of the local businesses, 85, that's a huge number for a survey. So highlights from the survey. One was business optimism. At the time of the survey, 75% of the businesses were optimistic that they would still be in business 5 years later. So that was high. If we were to do it today, maybe some of them would say no, but because of the complications from the pandemic and the continued downturn in oil and gas, but some local businesses are busier than ever. So depends what kind of business you're in. One of the questions was availability of medical treatment. Does that affect the ability of employers to hire and retain employees? Because it's really erratic with the family care clinic and our medicals here. The availability of medical treatment does affect some businesses. So it definitely, we had about just over 25% of them said, yes, it does affect us. And we had anecdotal comments. Yeah, our people go off to the family care clinic and they don't come back for the rest of the day. And it didn't used to be that. We knew that there was this, a discrete hour and a half block, they'd come back and stuff, and we're losing a lot of productivity for that. Another thing was women in business. There was a large number of women that were owners or managers. We're getting close to 50%. So that's notable. There were 3 other highlights, and we'll discuss them in the following slides. Business supports. 2 most important priorities for business supports were labor market attraction and marketing. They both, 30% of our survey participants said yes, they're the most important, followed by workplace education and training. And so as a result, the business barriers actually follow from that. So since our highest business support required was labor market and attraction, is also the highest barrier. 54% of our businesses said finding qualified labor was a real problem. The second most common business support was marketing. And so the biggest business barrier was demand. So there's some correlation between there. The demand, they need help marketing to increase their demand. And about a quarter of businesses mentioned that. Other barriers that were listed that weren't in the survey specifically, things like federal government regulations around pipelines, softwood lumber agreements, high tariffs, US custom fees, fuel surcharges, especially for our natural resources industries and our big other barriers were increased costs for insurance. There's been big bumps in insurance recently. The poor road conditions, especially Highway 88, lack of reasonably priced accommodation, and just the uncertainty over downtown viability. We know that we've been trying to, work on a downtown plan. And the last one was about business friendly. We asked all of our survey participants if they viewed the town of Slave Lake as business friendly, if they viewed the community, and that was the other businesses around them and the residents as business friendly, and finally the Chamber of Commerce as business friendly. So 60% or greater of all those surveys said yes, all town of Slave Lake at 60%, Chamber at 67%, and the local community at nearly 85%. So improvements could be made, but it was at least a positive, some positive feedback. So when we talk about employees, we have a huge mix of part-time, full-time, and seasonal in our community. I was surprised by how much. And we also have a huge seasonal workforce, especially in the forestry industry. We see that a lot. Labor attraction and retention. So this is our worst barrier or problem listed according to the survey. So it's a huge problem. Employers need better methods to hire suitable local candidates, especially when they're willing to train them, but they don't know, there's no connection. They don't know how to reach out and find them necessarily. And that's one of the things that we heard. Daycare is not easily available for night and weekend shifts. For
The daytime shifts, it hasn't been a problem. I can't speak to it right now, how it is, but it was a problem if you had outside of the Monday to Friday business hours. Employers are looking for eager, willing, quality workers. Sometimes that was a problem. The quality of their workers, you know, if they found somebody better, they wanted to replace them. Some employers recruit from outside the Lesser Slave Lake region, especially for technical and professional jobs, but there's a constant turnover in staff. So they'll come here for a while, they get some experience and they move on, and it's a revolving door. And it's because staff don't want to stay, they want to move on, it's not their hometown, or they lack the support to make Slave Lake their new hometown. We did hear that one. Wage rates. There are a fair number of minimum wage positions, things like sales and hospitality, and they're hard to fill locally because the industrial positions, you can't compete with them. And yeah, a lot of people a lot of the employers said, yeah, it's hard to fill those positions. When it comes to qualified labor, many applicants lack the training or experience. We're a small town, we're far away from the city. Yeah, so the experience or our qualifications aren't as great. Sometimes employees are hired from outside of Canada, but there's very high costs and processing time for these employees. Finally, the instability, especially in the oil and gas industry, the uncertainty makes the oil field jobs less attractive despite, you know, the higher wages they typically had. We've been seeing that at Community Futures. People have been coming to us thinking, I don't think I'm going to work again in oil and gas, or even if it does come back, it's going to be erratic, so I want to make a move. So, vacant jobs. So at the time of the survey, there were 57 vacant positions, and they were across the full-time, part-time, seasonal round two. And so this is a word cloud. And so anything that is larger and is a greater number of vacant jobs, this is fall of 2019. So food services had the greatest number of vacancies. There was a whole selection, you know, administration, sales, production, technical. And then there were some positions, professional jobs, healthcare professionals, lawyers, and accountants even showed up on that list. Training. Okay, so training, the interest in training was high on the marketing related things, because marketing was training in marketing was 39%, training in customer service, 37%. So that's a large amount of interest. And it was also, marketing was considered a significant barrier. So people wanted to see training in those areas. Some businesses were not familiar that Northern Lakes College provides a lot of training for this area. If it's business related, sometimes Community Futures and Chamber of Commerce will provide some of that training as well. We had other examples of training, equipment training, such as forklift, scissor lift, bobcat, trucking. So this was totally, didn't fit in the 7 categories that we had already listed on the survey. They were specific examples. Financial training, such as bookkeeping, financial literacy. Some of them are there, actually, if you look at Northern Lakes College, a few of them. The computer training, things like business operations, succession planning, strategic planning, leadership, mental health in the workplace. That'll be probably even larger interest now. Hiring foreign workers, human resources training, hiring contractors, opening storefronts. When it came to first aid, safety, and food safe, the request was that if they could be available more often, because sometimes you have to wait for that. Trades training, including basic carpentry, came up. I'm surprised at that one because we do usually have some basic carpentry courses here. And finally, paralegal training. If you're, there have been 4 lawyers' office in this area, and it's always a question of whether or not they can find trained staff or have to train their own staff up. And it's a bit specialized. Sales and marketing, there are 3 focus areas. Marketing training. Business want the skills to deal with the trends and to deal with demand. And they also want customer service training. So, and this will lead to better, hopefully better sales and better customer experience. Expansion plans. So prior to 2019, businesses had already expanded. We're surprised at how many businesses said, oh, but we'd already done an expansion. Things like additional storage capacity, new pipelines. Some had expanded from Slave Lake into new locations outside of Slave Lake. 44% of the businesses at the time of the survey had expansion plans in 2019. And potentially this could add 206 more jobs to our market. The things business owners or managers said they required for expansion were things like financial support to do the expansion, labor market attraction and retention for the employees required, marketing support, training support. Some businesses mention an increase in customers or sales required for their business to consider expanding. They still had the demand problems. There's also a big challenge to find well-priced land and buildings. Leasing costs are often quite high. Okay. So this is the town of Slave Lake. So the questions we're asking for feedback about the town of Slave Lake services. So the town, first of all, scored 60% on the business friendly. So that was positive. But when it came down to specific concerns, some businesses listed communication as poor, disorganized, and not proactive, that bylaws had too many discretionary rules and were very bureaucratic, that zoning issues were difficult, expensive, and restrictive, that signage rules were restrictive, and that there were high tax costs. Additionally, survey participants wanted more transparency in decision-making, and more involvement or engagement was requested from the business community. Some businesses felt that the town should do a better job to attract business or industry and to make Slave Lake more affordable. Now, some of the things are definitely in your wheelhouse. Some of them, you may be able to do things that might improve those, but yeah, you may not be the main push behind it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, to make Slave Lake more affordable, you control the taxes, but you don't control the entire real estate market. Like that's not in the Slave Lake, but the people are saying, yeah, the affordability question is something we want our community to be as more affordable. So,
Okay.
so you're aware that that's out there, and yeah. The comments from the community, which was residents or other businesses, were generally very positive. Stronger shop local emphasis by residents were considered really important. A greater awareness of the variety of products and services available, and ideas to deal with online competition from outside the community. Incentives and improvements. So businesses were asked what incentives would help Slave Lake businesses grow or upgrade. There were a lot of suggestions, as well as sometimes improvements. Sometimes town directly be involved in it. Others, it could be other parties that might be involved in it. But yeah, there's a long list of them. So on the financial aid, bursaries, grants, lower taxes, waive startup fees. And then business and community, things like shop local campaign, centralized website for local businesses, other assistance for the business and community. I'll let you take a look at that. Mm-hmm. And then the other part was the economic development support. So yeah, there's a list that fall into the area of strictly economic development support. And I'll take a look at that one. The tourism and event tourism support for sporting events is part of that. Business attraction and investment activities, things to do with the planning department. Any business support activities for entrepreneurs. And then other ones like a business cluster. And we can take that one. So as far as recommendations, number one was coordination of agencies. So there were 6 recommendations. That was the first one. So we suggest continuing with the current collaboration. So we had 4 parties. That was the town, a chamber, Community Futures, and Alberta Labor and Immigration, but also consider adding the MD, Sawridge First Nation, and also Northern Lakes College, especially as a training and research partner. Strategic planning is important for businesses, and that is available. Community Futures can give some assistance in that because we can provide some strategic planning services at low or no cost to businesses and nonprofits. Things like succession planning, some of the local banks can bring in expertise to help local businesses with that, and there might be others in the community. Workshops, so regarding business and business areas, Josh will talk about that in a minute. There is a list of things that we are actually organized in the next few months. Collaboration at the town. Economic development and planning need to work hand in hand to streamline planning processes, improve economic development services. So it's always great when those two, they have different focuses, but when they work together with the public, it is better for economic development. Labor attraction and retention. Things like job fairs, understanding employee expectations, best HR practices, help employers to recruit and retain employees. And finally, we did this survey. It was 85 parties. It took a while to do this, but if we could do even an annual blitz with the parties that were involved in this, you know, take 1 week and get out there and talk and get some feedback. Even you get 20 or 25 business involved, you still get decent data to know what your trends and where things are going. And that to do this more often. I know City of Airdrie does a big blitz, and it's a 1-day blitz. And they want the feedback annually to see what they're doing for economic development. Yeah, and so it's Community Futures that was involved in preparing the presentation of the comments and the report. And we'd like to thank all the businesses that participated and for the town allowing us to do the presentation.
Okay.
Any questions?
Well, Josh
Was going to talk. Yeah, Josh.
Speak from here. Can you hear me?
They can't hear in the mic half the time, so you kind of, yeah.
Hi, guys. All right, so I'll kind of go over the workshops and things Community Futures is working on, just so you guys are aware. So Community Futures, we're actually partnering with another Community Futures in the Whitecourt area who is trying to bring in consultants and other workforce professionals who might be able to help businesses through this whole post-COVID, well, it's still COVID. So during this time, one of those is a series of sessions to help businesses to refocus their business and to rethink about how they run their things. So it's a series of 3 events. One's called Design Thinking, getting businesses to think outside the box. Lean Canvas, which is understanding the better planning for their business, and then business resiliency. They have a speaker who's going to come to each region. So there will be one coming to Slave Lake for each of these sessions. So Slave Lake sessions are slated for September 30th, October 22nd, and November 10th. And we will be announcing it on our Facebook page, as well as sharing it with the town of Slave Lake. We'll mail it off to you. Once they're confirmed. So we're just waiting for confirmation on those dates. Another series that we're working on is on customer service during this time and during this pandemic, on teaching businesses how to manage customer service during this time. So that is going to be an online webinar that you can attend. It will also be recorded and available on our website later on, so people can access the information afterwards. If you buy in, it's $5 per course to attend the live versions. So the first one is customer service post-COVID. So it's October 7th. That's going to be in the morning, 10 a.m. to 12:30. We have leadership in the new normal. That's going to be for more of the leaders of the business. October 14th, that's an evening one, 6:30 to 9. And then we have helping community move ahead after COVID. And that's October 21st at 1:30 p.m. till 3 p.m. We're encouraging people to attend all three if they possibly can, but it's totally up to them. Later on, we are also still running forward with our LeaderCast Women project. Of course, if things go south, then we may have to cancel or postpone, but we're just going to plan for it anyways. That's slated for November 7th at the Legacy Center. We also have, we're also working on a survey to do throughout the region to get a consultant to come through. We originally planned in partnership with White Court to do it through an LMP, so the Labor Market Partnership Grant Program. Unfortunately, they denied it, so we reapplied through a different grant program called Future Skills Center. We're still going to wait. We won't get results or to hear back whether they'll approve that grant or not in about 5 weeks still. We're waiting on it. So that survey is supposed to be going over post-COVID, the effects of COVID on business, how it affected them, and the survey is supposed to give us data on how we move forward in supporting those businesses during this time. So we'll see. Other events that we're looking on, we're working on a Halloween collaboration with businesses on some plane. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but we're working with one of your fellow councillors on that project. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce on Business Week. So we'll be presenting, so far on the slate is a financial statements course, reading financial statements. A lot of businesses, unfortunately, don't know how to read financial statements, so it's a big one. An update on CEBA and CEWS. We're planning to do some marketing courses from a local marketing person, as well as maybe touching possibly on safety policy or new safety policies through AHS that are required of businesses now. Just a quick update, RRF loans. So I don't know if you're familiar, we also offered those $40,000 loans that the banks were offering, Community Futures was. We ended up giving out 26 loans within this region. Our region spans from High Prairie to Wabasca, but the majority of the loans were in Slave Lake. We've given out $770,000 within the region, and each loan averaged about $29,000. So we've been very, very busy. I don't know if you're familiar with Community Futures. We usually do about 12 to 13 loans a year. So this has grown our portfolio extensively. Yes.
So each loan averaged about $29,000.
Yeah.
For the federal program, that was the $40,000 one?
Yeah. Yeah.
So people were eligible to take a $40,000 loan, but only took 29?
So our program was slightly different than the banks. So the banks just kind of approved you clicked a button, it was done. Our program, unfortunately, the federal government put a lot more stops on us. They said, okay, you have to analyze the portfolio. You have to see if this business is going to be viable. And the reason being is we gave loans to people who were also sole proprietors. So the other loans programs, when they rolled out, weren't for sole proprietors. You had to be incorporated and you had to have so much in payroll. So ours you didn't require any payroll to apply for loans. So they wanted us to do extra due diligence, giving out these funds. So part of that was we analyzed each portfolio that came in. They had to submit their financials, business information, and we had to gather whether they needed, how much they needed, whether they needed the funds, or whether they would be a viable business moving forward. And so out of that, 26 clients were approved.
Was a portion of that forgivable too, or no?
Yes, 25%, just like the other loan programs.
Good.
Yeah, they've got 2.5 years to pay all of that off, and if they do the full payment within 2.5 years, it's forgivable, a 25% forgivable.
Yeah, it's great for our community. So I'm glad we got a few businesses in there taking advantage. You know, it injects funds into our community. So yeah, it's been good. It's been a good year so far. A little crazy for us, but good for us. So
Okay.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, I'll jump into questions or comments from council. As I don't see a ton, I'll start by, so Josh, the ones that you're hosting at the end of September that you coordinated with White Court there,
yes,
you didn't say, are those ones virtual too, or those are in person?
for Slave Lake, we're planning to be in person. We're also doing it at High Prairie. That might be virtual. If it is virtual, we'll let everyone know, because then people from Slave Lake could also jump on those as well if they can't make it to the other dates.
So where would they be in person here?
Here we're I believe Jess has a slated place. I don't know for sure because she hasn't finalized everything. So
Okay.
we'll find out probably this week. I'll have a place for that.
Okay.
High Prairie, unfortunately, we've had a really challenging time finding a place. We're not expecting a huge amount of people coming to these events. We're probably slating maximum 20 to each event, and that's a maximum. So I'm sure we're going to find space that we can appropriately space out everyone for this
So
event.
are those ones recorded as well? Like, does the business community have the access then to see that stuff afterwards or not?
We're asking. So we did put the request in actually on Friday. We're still waiting for a response from that.
Okay.
But hopefully we will be able to record that. And again, everything that we do record, we're putting on our website so people can access by, it's the COVID resources portion of our website. You go on, it pops up, you sign up, and then you get access to all the information that we pre-record.
Okay. And so then the other ones that you talked about, like the customer service ones and things like that, that rated high in here as an area that businesses were looking for, it was a $5 option or something to go onto that, or to do it live, or you could watch it later for nothing?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So the live portion was $5. Essentially, we were told by the Alberta Labor, who was our partner in this project,
Yeah.
that it is good for us to charge something for this so people buy in more. So we were asked to charge as part of the grant program. So we do charge a nominal fee just to make sure. And then if it's live, you can ask questions, get involved, et cetera, et cetera.
Fair enough. So, but is there a time limit on these resources being available? Like, is there an opportunity in our economic development stuff with our own website to post some of the stuff afterwards and be like, here's a bunch of quick links where you can go on and see a bunch of videos, or will that be on your own stuff, or it's only available for 30 days, or how does that work?
The information will be available continuously for a long period of time on our site. We do encourage people to go through our site because the registrations helps us get our numbers as community futures for our funding from the federal government. So them accessing the information through our site gives us their information to put into our system. So, but they will be posted to our site and most likely permanently stay there until they're obsolete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, especially with the economic climate that we're in, a lot of business entrepreneurs and owners are basically, well, you're in the trenches a lot of those times. So if you have the opportunity to review some of that stuff later, we could get better buy-in. I think the town would be excited to promote some of these resources that are free and available for businesses to go on and use. So, as those things come up, please make sure that the message gets across to our team.
Yeah, we'll send out all the marketing things for all these things that come out. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Appreciate you taking the time. I guess a lot of this stuff as we go through it will be, what's pertinent to today. Obviously, the marketplace has changed. We are excited about growth and economic development and the town becoming more business friendly. We've invested $250,000 into an economic development program on a year that some would question, why would you even bother? Because, I would say that I think we need it now more than ever. So we look forward to working with the various community groups as we move forward and seeing how we can further strengthen our relationship with the business community and make sure that we're sending the right message. So
that sounds great.
okay. As I see nothing else from council, appreciate you guys taking the time to come here, and we'll jump in the rest of our agenda.
Perfect. Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Okay, so we have the minutes of our previous meetings in our package, starting on page 29, is the meeting from September 1st. Any issues? Councillor Ferguson,
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes from September 1st as presented.
any discussion? Call the question, those in favor, that is carried. Then we have on page 39, our package, the minutes from September 8th. Any issues, any concerns? If not, Councillor King,
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of September 8th as presented.
any discussion? Call the question, those in favor, that is carried. We'll jump in next to our CAO update. We're still working through technical difficulties about getting a microphone on that table, but hopefully we'll get there. Floor is yours.
Good evening, Your Worship and the members of council. My CAO update starts with the health and safety topic. All town of Slave Lake employees are reporting healthy from the COVID-19 as of September 14th. 2 incidents were reported in the past 2 weeks, and those injured have been released from the medical facilities. We had a visit from the Provincial Occupational Health and Safety Officer on September 10th, and as a result, the officer found that the town is complying and surpassing all COVID-19 related requirements laid out by Alberta Health Services. Our front counter processed average of less than 10 customers for utility fees and taxes, and around 3 visits for the planning and development inquiries per week. Finance has been also compiling the 2021 budget data for other departments as well. Our operations department staff have been continuing with ongoing duties, including tree and grass removal around multi-recreation center, recycle center cleanup, road marking on Main Street, spray patching and pothole repairs on asphalt surface, lagoon effluent testing, lift station maintenance, manhole repairs, and updating our GIS database. Our planning department staff led a tour of Rennie Hall Plaza with various town staff, where the staff collaborated for upgrades. From our economic development front, all departments are now incorporating community economic development as a performance measure of their operating and capital budgets. Staff have also initiated engagement with several provincial ministries, the Boreal Center and Rotary Club. We are also compiling a list of petrochemical downstream industries and opportunities in tourism. Fire department received total 10 calls last week, including 1 structural fire and 3 motor vehicle collisions. Our fire department is also leading the corporate asset management initiative in collaboration with the community services department. Further, various duties have been performed, such as airport health and safety inspection, fire apparatus maintenance, and fire smart measures. One notable progress in our capital infrastructure front is the installation of the new aeration system for cells 3 and 4, which is expected to be substantially completed by mid-October. Our peace officer responded to 19 complaints and investigations last week. Majority of these are animal control and traffic related. Due to the college's boiler replacement project, the pool will likely not be relaunched until the beginning of February next year. Ice installation is completed in Tervita Arena. Multi-recreation center continues to host the farmers market on Fridays. Various parks maintenance work has been conducted, including cutting and trimming and removal of prohibited and noxious weeds. Further, tickets are now on sale for the Banff Center Mountain Film Festival at Legacy Center. Meetings with ice users to finalize ice schedules have been done as well. Various recreation programs will be advertised, and private ice booking times are available this week as user groups finalize their schedules. With this, it concludes my CA update, Your Worship and the council members. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Okay, questions from council? Councilor McGregor.
I was shocked to read shotguns. So, GFL, does GFL actually recycle all of the recycling that we put into the recycle depot and they pick up? Or is now recycling by the wayside and they just haul everything to the dump in Thornhill?
They haul recycling to a recycle center in Edmonton where it is sorted. What percentage of the recycled stuff actually shows up there and what they keep, I have no idea.
Okay, so, well, just because, it was brought to my attention that, yeah, that's their, recycling is kind of going by the wayside around the world, we're not really recycling. And so if we're keeping a recycling center, we're paying for all of that, we're paying for curbside recycling, and we're just throwing it in the garbage, we're just basically throwing, money away. So can we find out what kind of percentage, or if we are just wasting money, is we're heading into budget? And the last time everybody wanted to keep everything, right? When we did our survey, everybody wanted to keep curbside recycling and they wanted to keep the recycling depot. But if we're throwing everything in the garbage anyway, then why don't we just throw in the garbage? I'm a recycler, so like I would like to see recycling thrown in the garbage. I'm someone that doesn't recycle. I can tell you, I got a lot of friends that throw everything in the garbage and they're good with it and costs us lots of money.
Well, the biggest issue in the recycle world is two things. One, the commodity it's a commodity and the market is tanked. And the other big, obviously, issue is that Canadians really, to be honest, suck at recycling. So we suck at actually preparing the product that someone would actually want to buy. So when we say, hey, could you rinse out your plastics? And we're just like, yeah, frig it. When it actually gets further down the line, they say, we're not rinsing it either. So frig it, and it ends up in the garbage. So, I'm not saying that's exactly what happens in Slave Lake, but I'm saying from a global thing that's some of the obstacles that they've been up against. But, we could ask GFL to come and give us an update on where the world is at. In fact,
So Your Worship, to the councillor, yes, absolutely, you're right. It's a global market that is being challenged in terms of recycling. There are countries that have been buying our recyclables before, and it's actually a challenge for big cities and small cities and towns as well, in Canada as well, that our importers have been very stringent in importing our stuff. We can delve in a little more, and we'll get back to you with some more details with our vendor.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I got one more question before you go. Did you hand up? Okay, just wait one moment. So the new lights out by Mr. Mike's, wonderful, great, but how about when you go one way, it's 60, and when you go this way, it's 80? Like, listen, let's get it together. Are we going 60 or are we going 80? Decide. So whoever's in charge of that, which is wonderful, highways and transportation. So I'm coming this way, coming into town, going to McDonald's for coffee. It's 60 all the way, so I get coffee and I turn around and lo and behold, now it's 80 going this way. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So I did it a few times just to make sure that it wasn't too early in the morning or too spacey or whatever. And no, it's really true.
okay, so help me out here. So
when you drive, so you come through the lights, instead of going across from Mr. Mike's, you're gonna turn and you're gonna go to McDonald's.
okay, so from 88 to Main Street, traveling west. Okay.
I don't know if it's west or east or north or south.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I'm going to McDonald's
Okay.
instead of going to Mr. Mike's. It's 60 now. All the signs are 60. So then when you turn around and you come back on that same highway, except you're going the other way, the sign says 80. You can't go two different speeds on one road going left or right. That's dumb.
Okay.
Well, that dumb isn't a nice word. I got 10 more I can think of. Dumb is the most polite word that it is. So let's, like, somebody needs to figure that out, because we're gonna start getting tickets there. I can see that that'll be the next thing, and I don't mind photo radar, Darren doesn't like it, so if we get those kind of tickets, we're gonna be fighting to get about what's going on. The other one that was brought to me is how come, so if it's been 80 and they just changed it to 60, and then we've been fighting about the highway going back to 80 and we can't get it, so something's doesn't add up there. Somebody figure that out for me.
You know, the biggest reason that Highway 88 hasn't gone back to 60 is they have a concern about how close the walking trail is.
Yeah, I know, I
So,
get all of
okay.
that, but let's get on the 60 and the 80 going the same way they're right.
Okay.
So through your worship to the council, we will take a look at it. And I believe that you're talking about the highway section, that one side is 60 kilometers coming into the town, which makes sense. And
Well, that one was just 80.
the 80 going out. So that's a transition section that we'll investigate. And if it is the highway jurisdiction, we'll talk to them
Perfect.
about it.
Okay.
And I got one more, but that's the fire permit stuff. That's it for me.
Okay. That's for fire permit stuff, is what you said?
Yeah, it's when the fire stuff comes up, I got a question for that one.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Any other questions? So I guess the most troubling news obviously is around the pool. And so the fact that there's talk that the pool is not going to be open until February. And my understanding is just there's a delay in getting the contract actually carried out. And so we're at the mercy of Northern Lakes College to wait for their repairs / investment to be made. And so I understand that that likely won't be done until January, at which point then we still have to refill the pool, treat the water, bring our staff back, train them, so on and so forth. So I can understand how the community would get frustrated around that, but I want it to be clear on why we have a delay, and we'll have to wait and see what happens.
That's your worship. I'll refer that to Director of Community Services.
We're good. Okay. I just want to make sure that Joe had a clearer picture of why it was going on, so. Okay, other than that, if there's no other questions and comments, we will jump into the rest of our agenda. Okay, public surveillance. Gary.
So excuse me, good evening, your worship and council. Here to talk a little bit about public surveillance cameras in Slave Lake. Last March, a motion was made to investigate the public surveillance camera program in Lac La Biche. Due to COVID-19, our trip to Lac La Biche was delayed. In August, myself and Staff Sergeant Spans attended Lac La Biche and met with their enforcement services manager, who showed us their system and showed us around their community. Lac La Biche has an integrated camera system in the sense that they have public surveillance cameras. They also have facility cameras, and everything's all tied into one system. They have monitors in their offices where their peace officers work. Now, their cameras aren't monitored on an ongoing basis, but because it's the office where peace officers work, they come and go, and they do have some viewing of the monitors that are on the wall. Their system is pretty intuitive. You can zoom in, move cameras around. It's high definition. Some of them have night vision capabilities and certainly provide decent coverage for them. Within the hamlet of Lac La Biche, there are 12 cameras mounted downtown, mounted on streetlight poles and focused on public spaces only. So they're capturing roadways and sidewalks. They also have 8 other cameras that are mounted, or sorry, there's 8 cameras, there's 12 total, 8 mounted on streetlight poles and 4 mounted on private businesses. The ones that are mounted on private businesses, they just pay a monthly rent to that business. I think they said they were offering about $30 a month. And those cameras, again, are specifically mounted so they're on facing sidewalks and streetways only. They're not there to monitor those businesses. They're there to monitor the public spaces. The challenge that the bonus or the good thing that the county there used is that they were able to use in-house staff to design and build their own system. So it's not like they went to a market and purchased the system. Their IT department, which is several staff, were able to design and create this system. When you put up cameras on streetlight poles, there's really two issues you have to get around, and one is power and the other one is network. They were able to source power by having batteries that charge when the streetlights are on at night and then powers the cameras through the rest of the day. They were also able to tackle the network issue by creating a series of small antennas that relay the signal from one to the next. And I don't know if you've been to Lac La Biche, but downtown is sort of raised from the rest of the town area. And that works to their advantage because it goes by sight line. So they were able to send the signal down the hill. There's not really any obstacles in their way. So they did have that advantage when they put the system together. The other ways you would have to do, or you could do that type of thing would either be a wired or cellular type of connection, which obviously has expense to it. There are advantages to having everything interconnected. So they did have an incident in their county office building. They were able to see the person leave the county office building, see them go out the parking lot, and then also see them go through to the downtown corridor on numerous cameras. They have similar FOIP type policies as our town now has. And they're very, very clear with the public when people call up and say, I want to see a footage of an incident that happened. They only disclose to law enforcement. So unless it's a police officer or a peace officer with a file number, they don't give out any information to anyone. And all their cameras are kept in a secure environment, so it's not accessible to the public. They estimated it's about approximately 100 videos get copied every year for the RCMP and about 60 for their own peace officers. Now, all those video footages don't always result in solved crime, but it becomes part of the package that goes towards solving the crime. So some of it might be additional evidence, but some of it could be key evidence that helps solve crimes. They've had files ranging from everything from really minor things all the way up to homicides that they've pulled video for. Some of the other privacy things that we found interesting is that, for example, they have a camera that's on a street focused on the sidewalk area because the licensed establishment in that area has a location where there's a lot of disturbances and fights and that kind of thing. So they have a camera aiming down the street there, but in that camera angle shot, it actually captures the side of a hotel. And those hotel rooms obviously are private, considered to be private dwellings in the sense that they are rented out to individual people. And so that through the software, they're able to basically block out each one of those windows. So when you look at the image, it's kind of interesting because there's little black squares on the image and it's recorded that way so that there's no way that you could capture what would be going on in that private space. So it's just an interesting way of addressing some of those privacy concerns that technology may not have been there to do that on a recorded camera system, a number of years ago. Lac La Biche County spent approximately $50,000 in building and designing their system. That is using their own staff, resourcing their own equipment, and so on. The best pricing that we could find was it would probably be about double of that to have a similar system where you install your infrastructure and then manage it separately. They say they spend about $3,000 a year on maintenance once it's up and running. It's actually a relatively inexpensive program to run outside of the time it takes to burn discs and provide that disclosure, which I'll come to in a little bit. While we were in Lac La Biche, we also observed their community ambassador program. We went there not to see this, but we ran into their two staff. They have two staff that are walking the streets of Lac La Biche all summer long, wearing navy blue clothing and carrying radios that are direct linked to the peace officers. While they're there, the program was intended to be eyes and ears for the peace officers, to be additional witnesses, I guess, for the peace officers. But while they're there, they also found that they're also talking to visitors, they're interacting with the business community. I know this similar programs in other locations have also been used for like surveys and those kinds of things within the business community as well. So it's just a add-on bonus that we happen to see their program. So going back to the camera system, they're, like I said before, they had the ability of doing this in-house. It would be more expensive to do it outside of through a contractor, which is probably what we would have. I wouldn't imagine our one IT person would be able to take on a project of this magnitude. Our current facilities within our system all have run on their own independent networks, so we're not all tied together. And like I said, it was nice to have it all tied together, but of course that would be obviously be another element to it and another cost. If we were to move forward with a camera type system in public space, one of the key challenges is defining those physical locations, figuring out where they go, and then figuring out those connections afterwards. And that's part of it, as well as addressing any privacy issues that need to be addressed. One of the challenges is when you mount cameras is, of course, crime patterns change, things change, and if you need to move things around, that's also a consideration that you have to factor in. And of course, any camera system that's mounted on primary highways has to have Alberta Transportation approval. In Lac La Biche, their main street or main avenue through downtown is also a primary highway. So that's one of their learning lessons, is they had to work with Alberta Transportation on any requirements that transportation had. One of the other challenges is that the RCMP have very clear policy restrictions on being involved with public surveillance or any type of surveillance cameras outside of their operations. And so any type of system such as this would have to be operated have to be located within a town facility and operated by town staff. Now, in my conversation with Staff Sergeant Spans, our municipal clerks that work in the detachment are town employees. So he did offer that potentially that is one solution, to have one of the municipal clerks come to a town facility and help us with management of the video. If, let's say, it had for providing copies for disclosure, they could come, let's say, to the town office or wherever the video system might be located. So that's just one opportunity. And of course, the other piece is that even in Lac La Biche, the system isn't monitored 24/7. That would be a significant cost if we wanted to move into that route. So throughout the month of August, we also had a company provide a demo unit of a different camera system at the fire hall. And that system was a trailer mounted system with a tower with motion activated lighting and motion activated cameras. That system was actually monitored 24/7, but it was only monitored when the motion detectors picked something up. We haven't been able to get definitive pricing from that company, and I'm still working on that. The advantage to that type of system is that if it's a trailer mount, it could be easily moved to a different location. That part of it would be easy, but as I understand it, it also runs off of a cellular network, so I'm expecting the cost to be quite significant. The downside to this is that the only theft they had in the month of August was not captured on camera because of the way the motion system worked. It did not get recorded. So there are some challenges with that. We also know that the camera system was working because the fire chief did have some phone calls for some false alarm type of things when volunteers were in the yard doing some other stuff. He also had they recorded some video, and also the company phoned him, say, hey, did you know this truck's driving in the yard? And it turned up it was a legitimate purpose. So we also know that it does do what it's intended. It just missed the actual only incident that they had, unfortunately. So in terms of cost, like I said, it was a rough estimate for doing a similar system to Lac La Biche would be about $100,000 capital investment, and then smaller amount of operational costs every year plus staff time. We're still waiting to get costs on the demo company. They weren't available at the time of writing this report. But that type of system would not require necessarily the capital outlay, but the ongoing operational expense. So really the options that council would have is we had identified that one option would be to refer this to our budget discussions. The second one is to really direct administration to develop much more specific information on possibilities. The intent there is really to, if you had other further ideas that you wanted us to explore around the public surveillance cameras, we can do that. As well as we could also refer the community ambassador type of program to budget deliberations, or of course, just receive this report for information. So our recommendation is to have this referred to the budget deliberations for further consideration.
Okay. Councilor Brandel.
A couple questions. So this is just for our facilities and in the downtown area?
Well, the public surveillance camera system network the cameras could be mounted in any public space. Lac La Biche has put them in the downtown area.
Okay.
But we could look at any space within the town limits.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, because I think we had talked about the entrances to town before, so yeah.
It's just that we would need Alberta transportation approvals on those entrances.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then your price tag of guesstimate of $100,000, but they did it for less because they did it in-house.
Yeah.
Is there no capacity for us to do it and get that cost savings too?
The county of Lac La Biche has a significant IT department. They said they had 3 staff working on this project pretty much full time from when it was started till it was up and running. We have 1 IT staff member that works for the town. So it'd be pretty hard, I think, for that person to take on a project of that similar scope.
Okay. Councilor Ferguson and Councilor Busk.
So you talk about a reduction in crime that was seen in Lac La Biche County. Did they give you any numbers or percentages on rough reduction or the impact?
Not definitive. They had specifically talked about the numbers of incidents that it was related to, but they haven't. I do note that, in the policing world, one of the crime indicators is your crime severity index. Lac La Biche's crime severity index, even prior to the camera system being installed and now, is very high. It's almost double of what ours is. So they do have significant crime issues. And so it's really hard. It's hard to compare apples to apples when we have that conversation.
Okay, Councilor Busk.
Well, thank you, Gary, for you and Officer Mr. Spans for going and doing this. I've heard from numerous people within this community that are fed up with the crime, and they wanted us to look at taking action and stuff like that. So I'd be interested in seeing what a little I guess, more definitive approach in terms of some actual costs instead of just a guesstimate. Maybe some locations like Councilor Brandel said along the outskirts of town, the 4 roads heading out of town, the downtown core, and some in the industrial and business areas, parks, things like this, whatever you think would be adequate locations, I guess, but I don't want to just go and guesstimate at $100,000 because it could be $250,000, it could be $50,000, right? So if we could get a little clearer picture, I think that would really help set budget.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Councilor Brandel.
I forgot to ask about the community ambassador. So they were actually staff of Lac La Biche, or?
They are staff of Lac La Biche County that they walk the downtown core is really what they do. Their enforcement services offices are in the Bold Center. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lac La Biche, but that's their large rec center sort of on the edge of town. They actually start their day there. They walk in, they walk through they spend their time walking the downtown. It's almost like a foot patrol, but they aren't sworn in. They're not peace officers or bylaw officers. They wear an enforcement services golf shirt that clearly says community ambassador on it, and they carry radios that they can talk directly to the peace officers.
And do they work 24/7 or just day shift?
No, they just
or-
primarily work day shift. And so they only have 2 staff. There's basically summer students, summer staff that work from May to August. And so the cost is relatively affordable.
So it's not year round?
It's not year round.
Oh, okay.
And then they walk, like I said, they walk the streets, they talk with people, have conversations with the business owners, and also alert the peace officers and, kind of act as an extra set of eyes.
Interesting.
Councillor Busk.
So while you were there, Gary, you were talking about the crime severity index. So did you have to figure or see how many bylaw officers they have in that community?
So the interesting piece is that Lac La Biche is a hamlet. And so it's the county of Lac La Biche. So their enforcement department works for the entire county. I think they said that they were at 8 peace officers and 2 more just started or just starting. Like they had 2 people that were with us that didn't have their appointments authority. They were still working on that process. So it's a fairly large department, but like I said, it also serves the entire county area.
And did Officer Spans give any idea what the complement is of officers there in terms of comparables and things like this?
No, but we could certainly find that out quite quickly.
Just if we're going to compare
Yeah.
things like that, it'd be nice to be able to say if we've got 14 positions here, if they've got 20 and 8 bylaw officers or 10 bylaw officers or whatever it is, and double the CSI, that's comparisons, right? So.
I'm more interested in a few other things. So first off, what did you guys think of it? I guess like this is all the data of, the things that are pluses and minuses and what it could cost or whatever else. Was it something there that when you talked to their RCMP, when you talked to their bylaw, they felt like it was a worthwhile investment?
They were very enthused in having the system. And it is very high definition in terms of quality. So that's one of the other challenges that oftentimes that comes about with any camera system is getting cameras that provide a good enough image, right?
If you're going to cheap out, you might as well not do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that even, some of my experiences with some of the cameras in our own facilities, there are some times where it's not the greatest of images. Theirs is really good quality. And that's one of the things that, they commented about because it's such a great quality. It's very helpful that, you're able to zoom in, you're actually able to see and able to use it. I think they had mixed reaction to some degree in the sense that it is used a lot and it's become a very useful tool. And they do actually, when their officers are in the office and they're get a call of something happening in the downtown, even if it's the RCMP responding because they hear each other on the radio, they look at the monitors and they try to figure out, seeing if they could have it on camera. For the officers that aren't directly involved. So there certainly was value in it. Like I said, that one challenge is also the time it takes them to burn the video and all that stuff and manage it. So that was the downside that they did have some comments around that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, like I'm interested with like Councillor Busk, part of the reason we ventured down this path and asked you to do this is that we understand that we do have issues when it comes to crime, especially property theft and some of the things that some of the, challenges that we run into. And so, we have said multiple times before there that, when it comes to reducing crime, it's a multifaceted approach that you got to use all the tools in your tool belt. So, is this a tool that's worth the investment and take a look at? I'd love to explore it more, have some discussions at budget, get a little clearer picture on what the actual impact would be to us and what we'd actually get for that. Does 100,000 get us 3 cameras downtown? Does 100,000 get us 14 cameras and we hit every entrance and exit out throughout the community and ties in our system and so on and so forth. So would love to see where that could actually go and would look forward to that discussion at budget. Councillor Ferguson.
I'd just like to make a motion.
Feel free.
The council refer the concept of public surveillance cameras to the 2021 budget process for further deliberations.
Any further discussion? Councillor Busk.
Wanted to say one other thing in that, when we're talking with Lac La Biche, and you say those quality cameras, or they're good quality videos and stuff like that. If they're happy with that, let's look at the same sourcing and stuff like that, same models, things like this. Not reinvent the wheel, go with what they know is working and stuff like that, so.
Absolutely.
You know, I'd also like to hammer home the point that I would love a strong recommendation to come from our bylaw and our peace officers and our RCMP that says, yes, I think this is a worthwhile investment, and don't feel like it's a council-driven project either, right? I'll leave that up for you guys to decide. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So good evening, your worship and members of council. The purpose of tonight's reports is to bring back the Sewage Lagoon Project borrowing bylaw for second, third, and final reading. On August 4th, we brought the bylaw for first reading, and that was passed. And tonight we are just looking to finalize the bylaw.
One point of clarity I would add. I was contacted by the newspaper today, and I know our own online pieces were celebrating, our own communication online on our website was communicating the fact of the excitement built around the funding that we got for the Sewage Lagoon project. Just to add some clarity, and did provide to Pearl, but for those that are watching and listening online, and I don't think we've provided this clarity to our own council yet. The celebration is the fact that they gave us a loan. So we had a couple of different options of where we could get our debenture, our financing there for the piece that was left over. We could go to a traditional bank, or we could go to some other sources. We went through a federal government opportunity that we seized, which was fantastic because we were able to, through Roland's hard work on his application, we were able to basically get $1 million of it forgiven, which is substantial money. But to be clear, we didn't get $7.5 million in grant funding. We got a $7.5 million loan that we celebrate monthly by making the payments in the years
Correct.
to come.
And in their release, they, you have to read it. It did say funding. It did not say grant funding.
Had some questions about that this week, so I just wanted to make that one clear. Okay, any questions on the report? Comments? If there's none, Councillor King.
I'll make a motion that refinancing Sewage Lagoon Upgrade Project bylaw 21-2020 receives second reading.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Brandel.
Make a motion that council gives unanimous consent to give refinancing Sewage Lagoon Upgrade Project bylaw 21-2020 third reading.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That's carried. Councillor Ferguson.
That refinancing Sewage Lagoon Upgrade Project number 21-2020 receives third and final reading.
You know what? Just a comment for process. I don't think we need in future. I don't think we need unanimous consent if we're not doing all three readings in the same one.
That's correct.
Yeah, we can,
Hey,
I can change it
it's there anyway.
just to
Okay.
make sure.
Okay, so got too excited there for a second. Call the question. Those in favor? That one's carried. Okay. Thanks, Roland.
Thank you.
I'd probably look way smarter if I would have done that before we did the motion and not afterwards. Okay, street sweeper, Calvin. For those that haven't noticed, there's an amended sheet on your package there for vendor purchase, the value assessment sheet. And Mr. Couturier, the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I've got one report for you tonight, and that's to provide you with the results of the 2020 street sweeper purchase and to recommend to purchase this successful supplier. The purchase of the sweeper was budgeted in 2020, and I apologize, I didn't have the budget money on there. It's 361,000 is what we had budgeted for it. We did some demos on 3 different units, and quite different units. We want to say that. And we had all the guys do the demos and stuff like that. So we'll be replacing the 2005 Elgin Eagle, and the old one will be traded into the supplier. We did quotes and specs on the review of the assessment for the best value assessment. The 3 units, we based them on price and product specs, design, operator maintenance, review, delivery date, warranty, and service and support. The one we are looking at is the Raymax. It's a totally different machine. The normal ones we've been buying have been a cabin chassis and a module on top of it. This is an actual purpose-built sweeper. So we haven't had a lot of luck with the cabin chassis and modules. They've been very high maintenance and breaking down and everything like this. This is an actual sweeper. It was built for sweeping, so it's just all one unit. So there's some goods about that. It's very well put together. The operators really liked it. There's only one steering wheel, and you sit right in the middle of it, and you can see out both sides versus 2 steering wheels and driving from each side of the cab. It's very well put together. All the wiring and everything is all labeled, and yeah. So we decided to go for that one. It did come in, the pricing, there's a sheet on the back of the pricing. Although it did come in low on the trade-in, there's a couple really nice things about it. We can send Fred, our fleet mechanic, to get trained, and he can do the warranty in-house. Huge on our side. We don't have to haul a unit to the city and downtime and stuff like that. A lot of the parts you can get just right at Canadian Tire. Some of the solenoids and stuff like that we can get right in town. They've got a parts depot. The outfit is from Calgary, but they've got a parts depot in Edmonton. So parts are pretty much overnight. Yeah, so it is, like I say, the trade-in value is pretty low, but compared to the others, the Joe Johnson one was fairly high for cost. That's for a bare bones machine. I spec out all the machines for bare bones and then add options after. The sweepers are so hard to spec out. So they have so many different options and stuff like that, eh? So these prices are for bare bone machine, and then we add the options to it.
What kind of options would you add for a street sweeper?
One was on the Cubex, the auxiliary steering wheel. So they have the steering wheel on the left-hand side, just like a car, but you always sweep from the right-hand side because you're in the curbs.
Right.
So for the Cubex, it's a $39,000 option to have another steering wheel. The unit we're looking at, you sit right in the middle. You can see down both sides. There's only one steering wheel. We did demo it out a few years ago, and they had some kinks, but they're relatively new. But they work through their kinks, and they give us 3 different contacts to ask about. One was in Saskatoon. They bought 3 of them. He just loves them. They sent their mechanic away to get trained, and so he's certified. He can do the warranty in-house. They're looking at purchasing, they've got 21 sweepers in their fleet, and they're looking at changing them all over to global. So there's one in Barhead. I tried to get a hold of that guy and he just didn't get me a call back, but everybody we've talked to says they're really good company to work with and stuff like that, so.
Okay.
So that being said, we give you three options. The first option is to purchase one sweeper from as we recommended in the best value assessment. The second option is to purchase one other than in the best value assessment. And a third option is to defer it. Excuse me.
Okay, Councillor Busk.
Question here, the sheet that you gave us here, it's 357,900. Is that plus tax? Oh, we get to 360,400?
That's without tax. Everything I do is, when I do quotes, I specify without tax.
So that's what I'm saying, the 360,400 is with tax.
Yeah, so that's that plus or minus the trade-in and then with the options. So the options with the full options and stuff, which wasn't a whole lot of options, they're fairly expensive, come to 360,400. So we're just a little under budget.
Okay, if there's no objections, I'd like to make a motion. Count.
You can, and then we'll have discussion. What are the other things we need? Go ahead, Councillor Busk.
Council directs administration to purchase one 2020 Global M4 HSD sweeper as recommended in the best value assessment sheet from Raymax for purchase price, including trade-in value of 360,400.
Okay, motion on the floor, Councillor Brandel.
Just a question, when you say that it's got a poor trade-in value, when I equate that to a vehicle, I probably wouldn't buy that vehicle because I'm going to think that it's not going to hold up and, you know, it's going to be beat to heck in 5 years or whatever.
No, that's the trade-in for our old machine.
Oh, our old one.
Yeah.
Oh, so I thought you were
They're
talking
giving
about.
us a crappy trade-in value on the.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Have a backup sweeper in case this one goes down, so.
Yes, we have two
Okay, I figured.
sweepers, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, motions on the floor? Call the question, those in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Fire Smart bylaw. Quickest report of the night, eh?
Good evening. All right, your worship and members of council, the purpose of the report before you is to consider second and third reading for bylaw 09-2020 or the Fire Smart bylaw. So this bylaw received first reading on May 5th and was subject to the required public hearing on August 18th. The Municipal Planning Commission reviewed it at its July 27, 2020 meeting and have indicated that they do not support the bylaw. Their primary concern was the additional cost to developers in order to build Fire Smart. Referral comments have been received. We advertised on the town's website and social media platforms for a period of about 6 weeks. We have received 4 written comments from citizens. 3 are attached to the report. 1 I handed out tonight for you, and I apologize. It was brought to my attention that there's some address information on these, and I didn't realize it was in there. So my apologies. Make sure in the future that that information isn't included. I won't bother going through the history. I think we've been through that a few times, and I was actually not going to go through the bylaw in its entirety. I thought we'd open the floor for some discussion. And I did have, you've read my recommendation, and I don't know that I need to go through that. But questions, because I'm sure there's many. Yeah.
So I just had one question asked of me. So this is for new permits only. So an example, so if I want to pull a permit to build a shed, is that going to be a new permit?
No, what the Fire Smart regulations, the way the bylaw is written would apply to new developments in new subdivisions.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just needed to double
Clarify,
check that.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Yeah,
Pardon? Well, it's all of Area B. So anything that's in Area B is south of Highway 2 on the map. And it's for any new subdivision. That was a discussion we had at council and the focus group a while back, that it wouldn't apply to, there's a few undeveloped lots within Glory Land, and that wouldn't apply. So it'd be new subdivision and new developments within that subdivision. These regulations would apply to. So anything in Area A, which is everything north of Highway 2, this wouldn't apply to, and anything that's already existing in the way of a subdivision in Area B, this wouldn't apply to.
Okay, so to be clear, all the things that we built into section A don't apply to anything because all the subdivisions are done.
Yes, and at this point, it would be for Area A, it's more of an educational thing. The new subdivisions that might apply is if the Sawridge Park Estates Phase 2 went ahead and saved the Sunset Place, right? Those are new subdivisions, new developments, but they're under the Area A requirements, so they're much softer for Area A because the risk factors are dramatically reduced over Area B.
Hey, Councilperson. Oh, sorry. Other questions, comments from council? Councilor Busk, Councilor King?
I understand with the new subdivisions in Area B being basically the only way that they can go into is the forest, right? Everything hasn't been developed out there. We're seeing it all over the place, Northern California, even Southern Alberta again this year, where this is all happening. I think everything anybody that's lived through this and lost their house in 2011 can attest that they never want to see anything like that happen again. None of us do. I just want to try and alleviate those people's concerns that to be able to, I'm not a developer. I'm not sure, Lori, but I can't imagine the amount of costs that are going to go into a larger development down there. I'm just scared of stagnating development in this community. Like I say, we're pretty well landlocked where we're at. The only place to go is basically to the south.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm all for economic development, things like this. I just don't want to see us, I guess, hurting ourselves in the future. So if something can be relooked at down the road, if it needs to be, if that's the case, I'm okay with it.
Well, with respect to that comment, this is, land use bylaws are really considered living documents. So if we pass the bylaw the way it is today and subdivision development got going and we found that maybe it was a deterrent or we were having issues, the land use bylaw regulations can be amended. They don't stay forever in perpetuity either. So we can change things depending on how council feels.
Okay, Councillor King.
So I've always been in favor of this bylaw. I think as municipal elected officials, one of our main roles is to guide policies and procedures that make our community safe, livable, and sustainable. Knowing that we live in a high-risk forest fire area, I think this bylaw is meant to do just that. So therefore, I continue to be in favor of this bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Brendel.
I don't know, I kind of agree with Councillor Busk that this scares me, and I think it's going to scare a lot of people away. And I know you say that we can change it later, but I think if people think that it's going to be a deterrent now, I think we should nip that in the bud before it gets to be a problem. So, yeah, I don't think I'm in favor of it, actually.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Councillor Ferguson.
Something that was brought up to me, I just kind of questioned. So we're looking at adding this layer of regulation and more development costs to people for protecting us from something that may happen in something that's provincial responsibility. So what role does the provincial government stand to play in this? So something that starts, 5 kilometers out of town, that's provincial responsibility. And we're adding a cost to our own homeowners for something that should be a provincial responsibility. If that makes sense, if I'm making my point across.
Yeah, you're trying to stress there, what is the province, the municipal, we're downloading that we're trying to
Yes.
protect our community, municipality has to look after it when, something that the province should be doing a little bit more on that buffer, that periphery, that edge or something to help play a role in fire smarting as well, right? We could probably debate that one for a while and I don't expect Lori to have an answer.
Yeah,
to
I don't
that, so.
have, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay,
sorry.
so I'll weigh in too and say I struggle with this. The easiest thing would be, yes, 100%. I agree 100% without a doubt that the things that are listed in here will make our community safer over time. I also agree that putting no houses in here and knocking down the entire forest all around here will also make us more safer for a time. And I guess it comes down to that risk versus reward thing. And I think that's part of where I struggle on this, is that this will help us to further reduce risk, but to the point where it might inhibit our growth as a community. And so I feel like if we had a home run here and we're on the right path, we would all more be in favor. And the fact that we had a group that consists of both council and public went out and looked at this and they're not in favor either. And then we had some public feedback and most of the feedback we got was negative. I feel like we need to make some tweaks there a little bit. So I would hate to take the work that this group did to put this together and just say, hey, we should just throw this in the trash. You talk about it being a living document, but I think that we need to move the needle a little bit more from the enforcement side to more to the education side and see if it's something, because we would be silly not to educate people that are doing development that there are better alternatives for them and that they should take advantage if their budget allows and the system allows to do it. I think there's still some stuff with the vegetation in here, some of the setbacks I think that could still work, that probably wouldn't have a huge impact on some of the developmental costs. But if we were a little bit more relaxed on materials, a lot of the feedback I got, because I did have some people even reach out to me this week that set up meetings with one-on-one stuff to talk about the fire smart regulations, is around the fact that, how much could we literally say sitting here that if our whole community had X, that, the fire that happened in 2011, it wouldn't have impacted us. It wouldn't have come into town just because we had changed the building materials. The pushback is around, if it's this 1 in 100 year, 1 in whatever event, we say it's 1 in 100, but it sure as hell doesn't feel like 1 in 100 anymore, that it would actually make that huge of a difference. And so I expect that, yes, it does somewhat of a difference, but I can't say that just because everyone had a tin roof in town that we would not have lost any structures in 2011 probably isn't accurate either. So, yeah, I think if we could soften some of this and move the needle a little bit and still accomplish something, because I think we have a responsibility as elected leaders to promote some of this fire smart education that we're doing. And we spend a lot of time talking about ourselves being a fire smart community and trying to lead our way in that. And part of that is how we build, how we develop, how do we structure our communities and our neighborhoods as we move forward. I think that makes sense, but I think if we could move the needle a little bit, I think that I could get my head wrapped around being in favor of something. So my thought was around, the fact that, could we leave some of the pieces in around some of the vegetation? And I think there's an error in here that I found on page, because this doesn't make sense to me. On page 79 in our package, which is 10 of the report. It's in section 12C. It talks about the coniferous trees shall comprise a minimum proportion of 50%. I'm thinking that's supposed to read to a maximum of. Coniferous trees are some of the ones we have the biggest issues with. They are the most flammable and whatever else, but we're basically saying, hey, take the most flammable kind of tree and you have to have 50% of that built in there. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'll go back and look at that. Yeah.
I was curious around too, and I apologize, Lori, that maybe should have brought this up before and never did. But, you know, talking about the minimum size and the minimum calipers of the trees, what's the point of that?
This is nothing, those, all of this stuff that you're looking at is what's been sitting in our bylaw, and all that's been added really is a reference to section 36C Fire Smart regs. So the caliper of the tree is just so that we don't, you know, when I ask for a landscaping plan and I say I need 15 coniferous trees, that I don't get 15 little seedlings like this, and that constitutes a tree. So we put a minimum caliper on a coniferous tree and a minimum height on a deciduous so that we get a decent sized tree.
But this is
and those are old regulations.
Okay.
And this is just showing you the complete section together. So
Okay.
that's nothing new there.
And forcing that landscaping more from a subdivision type.
Well, and from the development side of thing, right? And it's just, we're asking for this separation of coniferous trees from buildings and from each other in order to meet Fire Smart. So we're not saying you can't plant a coniferous tree. We're just saying we want them separated from, you know, far enough away from the building that they don't start the building on fire, and that you don't have 5 or 6 of them in a cluster, you know, to create that fuel source. So spread them out on the site. So that's the strategy behind the Fire Smart landscaping.
And that's why they all have to be 1.5 meters from each other?
Yeah. Or 7, it's more than 1.5 meters.
I thought it was 1.5 meters.
So the minimum size is 2 meters with a 50 millimeter caliper. I'm just looking here. 1 tree for every 45 square meters of landscaped area. This is not, those are the old regs. So where is the 1 meter you're referring to?
Sorry, I apologize. I thought there was something in here written about. that
1
they had
meter,
to be-
yeah. In the, on page 3 or 72 of the package, it talks about separation of coniferous trees.
7 meters.
7
from-
meters from structures and then 8
8
meters from
another
each other.
coniferous tree.
Yeah.
Okay, but theoretically, I could have other deciduous trees. within that
Absolutely.
8 meter.
Not a
yeah.
problem.
Okay, we're just
Yeah.
trying to reduce the amount of coniferous trees
Yeah.
and their proximity to each other.
Correct.
Largely from a standpoint that we find them to be more flammable than
A lot more flammable. Yeah.
our other areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's proven that when a forest fire hits an aspen stand, it slows right down versus hitting spruce or pine or anything else where it takes right off. With respect to your comment, there is the option, and if I'm understanding council, there is a concern over the costs that might be associated with putting in some of these requirements. I would say that the landscaping is really not a big issue. Reducing the number of coniferous and spreading them out doesn't have a huge cost. Maintenance of the 1.5 meter non-combustible zone around the home, in my opinion, not a real big cost factor. All we're saying is we're not putting things in that area that are easily ignitable that will start the home on fire. So not a real big ticket cost. Fencing we found was not a big ticket item. Fire resistive fencing, which is basically chain link or metal fence, considerably cheaper than a wooden fence to build. Even now, you know, with the shortage of treated lumber because of COVID, this was pricing that was done at the beginning of this project. So fencing is not a big ticket item. As well, the asphalt shingles, that's an easy win. They're already considered a Class A, and it's probably 99% of the structures in the community have asphalt shingles. So where the costs really come in is the exterior siding and the decks, porches, and balconies being constructed of the fire resistive. So there is the opportunity to remove, if council would like to, section 8, which is on page 75, A and B from, and then it would be section 9, A and B from on page 76. This takes away the requirement to side with fire resistive or developed balconies. I do want to say, if we're going to go from the standpoint of public education and letting people know where the wildfire risks are, I would say don't take away the wildfire risk assessment. If you don't have a trained professional who understands what they're looking at, providing you a report with the risks associated with that piece of property, the average person is going to have no idea. And if they have that wildfire risk assessment, then they can make the decision themselves that, while I'm not required to build with fire resistant materials, I just might, based on the information in that wildfire risk assessment. It's not a big ticket cost, and our fire department staff are able to conduct those wildfire risk assessments. So again, I think it's the 8A and B and the 9A and B where the costs are really the big ticket items.
So a couple things I would throw out there. So rather than just eliminate them, I wonder if we could just change the wording to say something, the Development Authority encourages you to consider these for Area B or something like that, rather than just cut them out, so that it becomes part of the education as well.
Just like you did here on in 8, may be required upon issuance of.
Yeah, so we can leave 8. So when you see may be required upon issuance, it means the Development Authority can look at it, look at the wildfire risk assessment and require them to put fire resistant materials. And on 9, it's shall. Then it's no longer at the discretion. The land use bylaw spells it out. So I just wanted you to be clear about that.
Right, so that, but it's left then up to the Development Authority to
Yes.
determine?
Yes,
What-
based on the wildfire risk assessment, whether they should be really considering it.
So let's say that hypothetically we do that, we change them both to may, so the Development Authority has the ability to decide what should or should not go in those areas. How are you going to explain to us process, how you're actually going to determine if what they have to do, who has to do what?
It would be based on the wildfire risk assessment. So if the wildfire risk assessment comes in and says that if you don't move remove fuel sources or whatever the case may be, then or increase your setback, there's probably going to be some mitigating measures that can be taken. They're not willing to do any of those things. And they're going to plunk their house in the middle of the, then based on that wildfire risk assessment, I'd be saying, yeah, I would say you're going to need to put fire resistive siding and decks on. However, if the wildfire risk, if you're willing to do those things to reduce the risk based on a wildfire risk assessment, then you won't need to.
Okay.
But it would be based on what that document says, that assessment from a fire smart specialist.
Okay, next question I'd have are on the 1.5 meter. So the 1.5 meter from the house, I get the whole idea of eliminating fuel sources right beside the house.
Right.
Totally makes sense to me. But then I think of our boulevard bylaw where we're very like dirt, grass, that's it, not doing anything else. Is that, what's the philosophy there? That, is there still some freedom for people to use that space for something that makes sense rather than just put a big tree there? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Like basically what we are saying shouldn't go there is like your wood pile shouldn't go there. Your wooden fence, if you have a wooden fence, say you opt to do that within that 1.5 meter zone, you would be putting metal attachments so that the fire would stop at that.
Become a candle wick, right?
That's right. Wicking it to the house. You wouldn't be putting, your cedar hedge or juniper bush right up against the house there. You'd put, if you wanted to put deciduous dogwoods and all kinds of things like that, there's a whole list of fire smart vegetation that is suitable within that 1.5 meter. So we're not saying sterilize that 1.5 meters, it's gravel and nothing can go in there. We're saying nothing that will combust should go in there.
Okay. So everybody else is pretty quiet, so I'll just keep talking here. So I will say, I like the idea of the wildfire assessment, largely because they can be done by our own fire department in our own community. It's a great opportunity to provide some education. I honestly think that we should just eliminate option A, because theoretically, with respect, if I look at the big picture is that, you know, we've literally filled in 80% of the community in option A. And now these last two subdivisions that realistically, when we want infill anyway, that we're going to hold them to a different standard than the rest of the 80% of the community. You know, I feel like we should just take that piece out, focus on B, which is a peripheral area, which would be one of our probably a higher risks. And this would be for future subdivisions. You would put in the May, we still do our wildfire stuff. They're not mandated to. It becomes an opportunity for us then to have some discussions with those people that are doing subdivisions to say, hey, what can we or cannot do there to move some things forward. So I think it starts to provide some, pieces in the legislation that show, hey, we actually take this seriously and we need to do some things on the periphery. But it provides more flexibility to have a discussion versus mandating them and scaring them away. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, what you're thinking is that that whole section 8A and B, so fire smart development A requirements would just come out.
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking is 8 should be what B reads and A shouldn't even be in there because theoretically, all we're doing is 2 possible future subdivisions, holding them to a different standard than the rest of the entire community in that zone.
Yeah.
Right? Like I just think.
Other than, yeah, you're right. There's not much there.
I'm just thinking that all of a sudden somebody decides to develop Sunset and all of a sudden we're telling all these people, okay, you have to have a metal gate, but the rest of the 85% of the community can get a wood one because we're just grandfathered them and you don't count. Really, is that a hill for us to die on anyway?
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I would just let that. Yeah, I would let A go and let's focus on the edge that's actually backing onto the bush. What we don't like is the fact that we would be forcing them to do it and passing these, you know, potentially development costs. So instead, we're still providing a wildfire assessment that has to be done. We should be able to minimize the cost and impact to them because our local people can do it.
And then it becomes an education piece if they want to do something.
Gives the development authority possibility to have some discussions there and oversee for the safety of the community. You know, if a developer isn't taking some of these things into account, they do have some flexibility to say, hey, like I'm concerned here from a community standpoint that there's some teeth here that we can go back and say, hey, developer X, we want to work with you, but here's our issues, right? So I just, you know, it was the middle ground that I could come up with in my head where we still accomplish something, but makes sense. Councillor Ferguson.
I'll say I've spoken about this since the beginning. I do believe that it should be largely education based. I do like the idea of the wildfire risk assessment because it provides lots of education. I've spoken about my own property. If I hadn't had the education from what happened from the 2011 fires, I probably wouldn't have built a fire smart home, but as is, I built a fire smart home. I do still have a concern though about if we include the word may. So that leaves, it's not clear then if somebody may or may not have to build with fire resistant materials. Like I said, I still think it should be education based. After presenting them with all the facts and the information, they should be the ones to make the final call on it. But that's just my 2 cents there.
And are you, just for clarification, that would be for area B?
Area B, yes.
Okay.
So that we're not forcing anybody to build with fire resistant materials, but we've provided them with the education to make the informed choice.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Councillor Brown wants to weigh in.
I just want to throw in a big ditto on that one.
Okay. Councillor Busk.
I guess the only reservation I have is when we have something like B, where it always seems to come back on Mrs. Skrinick here, where it's she's the one that has to interpret and tell the person that's building the house, okay, well, your wildfire assessment says that you're too close, you're gonna have to do this, right? And then she's always the one that gets dumped on because she's the one that's just increased this person's cost of his house $20,000, let's say, or whatever it is. So I think that we have to give direction either through I don't think you can do CDC. I want to say where the council of the day would be taking the brunt of the decision instead of everybody thinking that it's yourself that's the the sole discretionary decision maker on this, you know what I'm saying? And you're the one that always seems to get the crap, right?
Well, the
So-
easiest way to eliminate that is then not leave it up to the development authority to interpret. And so theoretically, you'd follow along the same lines that Councillor Ferguson has said already.
Or you can make it discretionary at the authority of the MPC and change the authority from the DO to the Municipal Planning Commission, where it goes to a body instead. That's an option.
Okay. Other questions, comments? So what I'm hearing is that the current version we don't love collectively, except for one, with respect. The compromise, what I'm hearing in here or whatever else, is that we could do something. Is everybody okay with the idea that option, area A, not forcing them to do anything? Does that make sense? Let's try and nail off some pieces.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so we can live with option A. There wouldn't be any requirements. I would still encourage us even to put some wording in there around education. We encourage you to, or something to that effect, Lori. But because, when we eliminate it totally, we miss an opportunity to educate. But there's nothing in there that forces them. David, you want to weigh in? Just speak loud. Actually, yeah, here, come sit here. It's even better. There you go. Perfect.
Through your worship to the council, as I gather, collectively, it seems as if the council wants to turn this into a more of a design guideline at the stage of the subdivision. And there is a way to do so. I think the semantics of may or shall, it's, you can put may and then it's still enforceable. So, the word doesn't really distinguish much. If you look at all the MGA, it's all may, but you can still enforce those things. The one way that to reflect the council's desire to turn this into more of a guideline and strongly advisable comments from our development authority is use this as a more of a design guideline and as a reference as part of subdivision approval. And as we approve, we ask the developer to use this as their guideline, which is not enforceable, yet it is highly recommended. So that is one way that most of the cities have done that. As on other, design guidelines. There are a lot of design guidelines that we use when we design subdivisions. And this could be part of the package too. So not enforceable yet, advisory, but it's a reference. So if one wishes to follow this, they can do so. And of course, we will affirmatively, support those recommendations because it's a good design best practice. Yet it is not really the rules under the subdivision regulation. So that way,
There's two things here too. This deals with both subdivision and development regs. So are you saying?
Same thing.
Remove,
Yeah.
same thing.
Same thing, advisory conditions.
So we could put together, it doesn't even have to be a design guideline. It could be a brochure, Fire Smart brochure that just provides the educational piece that you're.
We're doing some of that now already, right?
We do all of that. We provide all that information as part of our subdivision and any, houses or anything like that, they get that information from us. Are we saying we don't want any of this then, or we want some, or we just don't want Fire Smart, the exterior the fire resistive materials for the decks and the siding? What is it that we're not really clear at this point?
Well, definitely, I think the materials in the building is definitely one that is a restrictive one that I don't think the majority of council is going to be in favor of. 100% without a doubt. I think the majority of council doesn't think that doing something in option A, like, I can see that, like, it's all great for us to say now, and it doesn't really impact any of us because Sunset's probably not going to get built up tomorrow. But theoretically, sometime later, it's just going to end up being on somebody's plate and they're not going to want to pass it anyway because the comment's going to be it's different than what everybody else is doing. So I think the whole A piece doesn't work. I think on the B side of stuff, we either say, let it all go and it just becomes a brochure, or are we going to enforce a wildfire assessment, which, you know, and maybe that's as far as council wants to go, that at least you have to have an assessment done. To at least have the opportunity then to have that discussion with some Fire Smart trained personnel that would encourage that developer to look at some options. I think that provides more teeth than what we're doing now, but definitely provides a lot of flexibility for them to do something there. David wants to weigh in again.
In that case, the fire assessment becomes the we'll leave that with the fire experts, the consultants, whatnot, and follow the recommendations. And then in that case, because of the expertise and the amount of effort that got into that, the general practices will accept their recommendation. Very difficult not to. So basically, by having that assessment report, which potentially could add another process in the development process, could be actually the power of that, because the professionals who are involved in that assessment will come up with all the methodologies, scientific methodologies, whatnot, and once the recommendation is there, although it is a recommendation, it is solid recommendation, which doesn't give a lot of opportunity for the council or the staff or the development industry to kind of sway away from.
So what I'm hearing is that you're telling us to be cautious about getting an assessment done and not following the recommendations.
In general, I'm just talking about the business practice when we involve an additional consulting process, and especially when the experts are involved in drafting and consulting, it kind of narrows our options, just because there's a lot of work that has been done in that assessment.
Okay, so are you saying we should have assessment or we shouldn't have assessment? Like you're I guess, you know.
In general, it adds one more layer. There's a traffic impact assessment, there's environmental impact assessment. There are a lot of different assessments, and fire assessment is one of them. And that in some projects, those are required. For example, in the highway transportation infrastructure project, traffic impact assessment is required. However, for other projects, they are not, because it adds additional layer to it. So choosing that assessment is to be done carefully, because it could add another layer. So I'm just letting out potential future risks.
So if we're saying that we want them to get a wildfire risk assessment, however, we're not putting any regulations in with respect to the siding or anything, I'm trying to understand how that would bog the process.
So once you decide to have assessment and follow the assessment report's recommendation, and then that recommendation will say, you know, because in this situation, we want to have this gates or whatever roofs run out. So based on that assessment, all the details of the subdivision design with regards to the fire emergency, who will do that?
What Dave is basically saying is that if we get this assessment done and has 14 recommendations in it, how do we just not go follow those recommendations? And you're saying, well, why can't we just use the assessment? And although it has recommendations in it, there's no built into the bylaws.
I can
We don't
see
have
it
any
from a
teeth.
subdivision standpoint that when we ask for a wildfire risk assessment for a subdivision, that there's going to be requirements that, so they might, have to remove fuel sources. They might have to build a trail around the periphery to extend the boundary and the setback or the no development zone. But for developments, for when you're actually, the subdivision's built, the fire smarting and the subdivision's done, and we're talking about building the house, if you don't provide, if the landowner doesn't get a wildfire risk assessment, they don't get the education component of wildfire at all. They just walk onto their site and looked at it with the untrained eye, and they don't know what they're looking at. They don't have any clue about whether they should be removing, some of the spruce and the dead and down and what things they should be doing to fire smart. So my opinion was from the developments, not the subdivision, we could say you're required to get a wildfire risk assessment and the document is yours. We can keep a copy in the file, but we don't require them to do anything with it. We don't say, well, you have to put now fire resistant siding or anything, but at least there's the educational component because they don't know anything. If this is the intent of some of these regulations is to try to educate, I don't know how you educate without giving them some sense of what their property has in the way of a risk assessment.
So as Sal agrees that education is kind of something that we need to focus, then there are different venues. As part of the subdivision development as well as the development process. And whether again, if it becomes our standard design guidelines that the developer references every time, so that he's well aware, or he or she is well aware when they put the subdivision layout, how to fire smart the subdivisions, although it's not enforceable, it's not compulsory. Other way is we let it out. So, if we want to educate the developers to be fire smart,
But it's not just developers from a subdivision standpoint. Lori's comment is about developers as an individual homeowner.
So, it's a subdivision regulation.
Yeah.
So, it needs to develop, I guess, you can be a landowner, you can be a developer, you can, it's just one parcel, it's not subdivision. It's not subdivided, one parcel. So you could say, that's why I say developer. And if it is advisory and educational purposes, I'm saying, because, the assessment itself is a condition. If you don't do the assessment, you're not getting an approval. That's how it is done. So I guess the council could debate whether you would want to use that assessment as a condition of approval, although you may not be enforceable as the step says. So that is the kind of debating point. Do you want to use assessment as an educational material or something else?
I think it shows the due diligence of the council and the town at the time, is showing that, okay, you're building in that area B. If you get this wildfire risk assessment done, I know there's a cost associated with it, but at least then you know the factors. If you're building out on the edge of the community in the
Wildland urban interface, yeah.
So that material is there in front of us. So if anyone, any developer wants to develop that area B, now we have something like guidelines that they can go through and apply this accordingly. That's one thing. Or if you want to put a little more teeth into it, you obligate the developer to go through the assessment, but it's not enforceable. It's a little weird because you mandated the developer to do the assessment, which means when assessment is done, there are different recommendations that are very strong or very big. So based on that strong recommendation, the developer might have to do things, otherwise damages. So, assessment has some teeth. So my point is, if the council wishes put out a more advisory and educational material, I'm saying assessment is a very strong fit to do so. Maybe different, again, different cities use different design guidelines to advise and to use it as reference materials. That is a way. Just adding assessment or things that additional evaluation adds up a little more. Potentially.
Okay, so moving things along. Question comes down then to council. Do we want something that we can sink a little more teeth into, or do we just want to stick strictly to education? If our goal is 100% education and that's it, we might as well just stick to a brochure and not stick anything else in here. If we're saying we want a little bit more teeth, then we should probably have some conversations about some of the landscaping things that are in here, wildfire assessments, so on and so forth. So where are you at? Councilor Ferguson.
Well, I am concerned after, some of those notes that, a developer comes in, they see all these, they're mandated to do a wildfire risk assessment, which does add another layer to it. And then they get this report and it may deter people to develop. That is a concern. So
your brochure only.
I've always been a very strong proponent of education. With some of the points noted, I don't know now if a wildfire risk assessment is the best way, if it's adding another layer of red tape to it, if that's the way to go. If our whole point is strictly to educate.
Okay. So to be clear though, brochure is kind of where you're leaning.
Brochure, or as Mr. Kim stated, design guidelines.
It's just a fancy brochure. Okay. Councilor King. Let's go around here. Let's figure out where we're headed here.
I'm still in the same boat. I don't think I was, I think we were put here to guide, not necessarily educate. And just coming from living in a different area, coming here, if I was to develop a house coming from somewhere else and I got these guidelines, I wouldn't follow the guidelines because I wouldn't think there's really an issue because I haven't lived in this environment. However, living here for as long as I have now, I would fire smart my house. So a brochure for me wouldn't do it. Living here and experiencing and listening to people living through what they had to go through with the wildfire experience really makes this important to me.
Okay.
Especially on the outskirts of town.
Okay, so leave it the way it is. Okay, Councilor McGregor, where's your head at?
Well, we've spent how many meetings did we have doing this? With all the Fire Smart Canada people, we had all the forestry here. I don't know, we spent numerous times going through this, giving suggestions, bringing it back. Now I feel like we just want to scrap it all and make a brochure. So what a waste of time and energy, and why do we even ask these people and why do we even listen to them then? If we're just gonna make a brochure, God, we've had a brochure since 2012 or 2013 we can give to people. So I'm not really in favor of just a brochure. What a waste of my time and everyone else's time and tax-paying dollars. I like something with some teeth in it. Or yeah, we might as well just give a brochure, call her a day, and then let's really reevaluate where we start asking experts to come in and take time off and from their job. And we've asked all the forestry people, we've asked fire people, we had Fire Smart bigwigs here, we had consultants here, we had planning here, we had counselors here, we had town people here, and now we want a brochure? I don't know. I feel more lost here in the last 25 minutes than I did in the 3 or 4 meetings that I attended.
So to be clear.
I got nothing for you. That's where I'm at. I got nothing for you anymore. I'm lost now. I was good before and I was ready to vote yes on it, and go forward, and now we just spun circles for 25 minutes and talked about a brochure and teeth. So lost.
Okay, so you're not in favor then of exactly how it is written now?
I'm not in favor. I was in favor of how it was written. I was ready to vote yes on it from listening to people that have quite a bit more education and quite a bit more detail and have dealt with things than me. So I really like when experts come in. I like to listen to them and I like to take their advice, and I like to do that due diligence for the rest of the community. But now I feel like we're getting a brochure, so we're getting a brochure. I don't know.
Councillor Busk.
I agree with Councillor McGregor in the fact that I think that we need to have controls in place in Area B. Area A, I think you're correct in saying that we've got 95% of the community already developed to a standard. I don't want to see that change. But when you're building on the periphery of the community, I think you need to be fire smarted. I think you need to have your assessment. And I would be in favor of having teeth of some kind to ensure that you're at least getting this assessment done. We've made our due diligence in terms of, okay, you're aware that you're building this. These are our guidelines of suggested guidelines of what should be done. And that way I think that we're covered.
Okay, so you want a brochure with teeth?
Oh, I'm happy the way that B is written here in this, in terms of with the materials that are required, with all of that stuff. So just not take out
Not
A.
A,
Sorry?
just not Fire Smart Area A.
So
Right.
you're past just a brochure with teeth. You're in like, yes, option, area B has to use certain materials. They have to use certain vegetation. They have to use whatever.
I think that's the due diligence part of it, yes.
Okay, we're all over the place here. Councillor Brandel.
I haven't changed my mind. Definitely want to scrap Area A. But, I'm all for due diligence, but putting the whole concept of Fire Smart into application versus theory are two totally different things. And once you put it into application, it's going to cause more grief and more layers and more expense to our builders. And we are struggling in that sector right now. The development is not happening already. So I don't want to stagnate it anymore. It goes against, I think that these rules are very restrictive and they go against everything that we've been striving for on that board right there, the vision statement and mission statement. I honestly think it like this actually scares me. So I am still not in favor.
Okay.
And if we do anything, it would probably be a design guideline
Okay,
for education.
it's your brochure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, let's hear what you have. You like the brochure, you want some teeth?
Well, I definitely don't like it the way it is. I think it's way too restrictive. To echo Councillor Brandel's comments, if that's what we're really trying to do, I don't think that we're on the same page. I appreciate that we had experts. We had a whole bunch of people that live, breathe, eat, sleep, Fire Smart, that said that this is what you should do, 100%. In fairness, I also think that at that meeting, a lot of the elected officials that have to look at more than just one lens of it didn't feel like it was a home run for us. And when it went out to our public, our MPC says, no, this doesn't work for us either. So if I had a whole bunch of lawyers in a room that figured out a whole bunch of stuff from a legal standpoint, I probably wouldn't ever do anything ever again. And I'd be very well protected, but I have to look at a bigger picture there, that I have to look at through multiple lenses and not just one. And so I'm definitely not in favor of the way it stands. If I had to pick one, I would definitely lean more towards having a brochure. I like having a little bit more teeth into it. I don't mind the wildfire assessment piece from a subdivision standpoint on the periphery. I think if a developer that was doing a subdivision took a look at the grand scale of things and had some input there from somebody from a larger scale, I think that that's beneficial to the point that, you know, the individual lots in there probably wouldn't need as much attention as the whole subdivision will if the subdivision was built appropriately. But like if, I don't know, like if I had to pick one, I would definitely lean towards more of an education piece only. And go from there. So,
Yeah,
but
if we just
that puts us at
just for
3-3
some
here.
clarity on that, if we do the education piece, I can't then ask for a wildfire risk assessment, right? For as part of
Agreed.
subdivision.
I totally
Okay.
understand that.
Okay.
But right now we're basically at a 3-3 spot here. In which case, whether we make a motion in favor of this, it gets defeated, or we make a motion in favor of what everybody else wants, it gets defeated. I'm questioning the point of that maybe we need to have our full council here to be able to make a decision. Other thoughts on this? Questions, comments from council? Councillor Busk.
So government gave us $20 million or whatever it was to be basically roll out the Fire Smart program to be able to learn lessons, be able to pass on those lessons. And like you said, Councilor McGregor said, we've had all the experts in here. Majority of us were in those meetings at one point or another. Like I said, you can sit there and hide away and don't do anything, or you can try and pass on, because basically I think that we are going to be one of the first communities that would have Fire Smart legislation like this, in terms of being able to be looked at by other communities to find out what they're going to do. I don't think that we have to be scared in the fact that if a developer is building south, they're going to realize that that's one of the wicks for the community if fire was to come, that they're going to want to try and Fire Smart to some degree. I think that we have to take more than just an educational approach to it. We have to take a strong approach in terms of, you're not going to go and create something that is potentially disastrous to the rest of the community, because that will spread this way if it's coming from the south. So I'm still in favor of trying to spread the lessons that we have learned over the last 10 years, 9 years, whatever it is.
I appreciate your passion, but unless you convince one of the three of us, we're still at where we're at.
So let's table it. Give Lori a couple of directions and table it till we get Sean back, and we've got some time to think about it again.
Okay. It ain't gonna kill us to do that?
No, I just, yeah, it's no big deal. I'll go back to FRIA. I have to get an extension past September 30th, which I'll do that
Not a
tomorrow.
big deal. Okay, and so the only purpose though to table is to have a seventh member here to be able to make a decision one way or another, correct? There's no information or work that Lori has to do to get us additional information.
So just for clarity, the three individuals that are not in favor, you're not in favor of any of it? The 1.2 meter combustible zone, the landscaping, nothing? None of that?
I'm in favor more from an educational standpoint.
Okay.
Okay, motion to table to, well, is everybody here at the third meeting in October? Give it another month to sit on it?
Well, I don't think we need a month.
Okay, we'll table to the next meeting then. Motion to table to the next meeting. You're okay with making that motion, Councillor McGregor?
I sure am.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. We will discuss next meeting again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's get into the rest here. The rest is me by the looks of it. Mayor's Corner, what's going on in my world? Had some meetings with some residents about Fire Smart this week. We're concerned about where we were going with this and what it says. But I guess we'll get into more of that next week. I'm doing some work with David and Leah over the next week or two. We're doing a tour, going out to the Bird Observatory, showing them some of the tourism types areas, meeting with Willie Dreger tomorrow afternoon. The MD wants to have a discussion about boat launch on our tri-council meeting on Thursday. So we're going to swing by there and just see some of that. Then next week, we've got some meetings set up with Mitsue Industrial Park. So we're going to talk to a couple of introduce them to some of the mill operators, Cardinal Energy out there. And I'm trying to set up something with Tiger Calcium, sorry. So I get to get these guys familiar with the people that are in those industries. I've been dealing with the MLA's office here, trying to get some momentum on some advocacy, some help for the Lesser Slave Lake Bird Observatory. Our first meeting I reported there last week went well. That being said, the minister's office has not followed up, is not returning my inquiries. They are talking to the MLA's office, and there's some frustration there about how they want to deal with that. So I can't say a lot, but I'm not making a lot of headway there, but I'll keep fighting. Chief the Reeve and I had a really good meeting last week, talking about some of the stuff for the upcoming tri-council meeting. One of the things that will be on the tri-council agenda, wherever I put it off to the side, was a discussion about economic development, and the chief had mentioned that we would really like to see the tri-council continue, but I think it's overdue to do a project or something with the group to keep them solidified and give them something to sink their teeth into. And so I said he was interested from the economic development and tourism side. I said, you know, that's the avenue, that's a space that the town is playing in right now. We're passionate about it. Reeve felt that there was definitely a space that they could, if they could understand what we're doing, that there's potential to play in that as well. And so we wanted to have a verbal discussion about that on Thursday, less about what a project we could do and more about a process to decide how we would come up with a project. So when you see that on the agenda, that's what that one is about. Then I got a weird request. I got a weird email last week that Ministry of Seniors and Housing through homelessness reached out to me that wanted to talk and answer a bunch of my inquiries about some stuff in regards to homelessness. It wasn't clear from her actually how that she had got my name or how we were supposed to have this conversation. And long story short, I did share with her the frustrations we have as a rural municipality when it comes to homelessness and vagrancy and the lack of provincial support to do that stuff. So they have done some help with funding through MAT program. And I said, although that is an asset, I said, I think really what's missing is some boots on the ground to help us coordinate some of these things, get people from point A to point B, collect the data, get some, we need some help on that side. So she wanted to connect with our staff. So she's going to reach out through to Gary and David to see if there's things that they could do to maybe help. So I know you're looking for more, but there really isn't much more on that, other than that there's a possibility that province has some resources and could help play in that space. I said at this point, any help would be helpful because we just feel like we're spinning our wheels and not accomplishing anything. So we'll see where that one goes. Other than that, my rest is in camera. Sorry. Motion to go in camera. Oh, correspondence. Yes, sorry. We have the Central Foothills Regional Mountain Pine Beetle Annual Report Summary for your viewing pleasure. There's no comments accepted. Motion to accept as information. Thank you, Councillor Busk. Call the question. Those in favor. That is carried. Motion to go on camera. Thank you, Councillor Busk. Call the question. Those in favor. That is carried.